efficient? Are you a practical person? Do you have a square palm and short fingers? Are you spiritual but grounded, level-headed, organized? Do you have a straight headline but a long heart line? If so, then you may well be highly compatible with Taehyung V from BTS. Now, in this video, we're going to be looking at all of the traits seen in Taehyung's hands to assess who might be the ideal partner for him. In this video, I'm going to analyze all I can in his palms and try to assess whether or not you might be compatible with Taehyung or someone like him. Now, if you've already watched my palm reading video on Taehyung, you'll already know a great deal about what I've extracted from what I see in his hands, so you'll already have some idea here. But he is a long palm and long fingers. His fingers are exceptionally long, and they taper into something of a fine point. His thumb does the same thing as well. These are very sort of delicate fingers. They're very responsive. He's very able to, and can't actually help this, soak up information around him, the thoughts and feelings of others, even this higher kind of information. He's highly receptive, psychic, even. There's some really, really sensitive spiritual awareness about him as well. So in all, he is an extremely sensitive individual. Now, he's really going to benefit from being he would be highly compatible with someone who is very grounded, very logical, rational, but also has someone who has a good deal of emotional awareness themselves and a good deal of an emotional intelligence themselves. So he would suit an earth hand. Now, that's someone with a square palm and short fingers. Now, the way you determine if you have short fingers, you might be looking at your hands and thinking, well, I have a square palm, but I don't know if I have short fingers. If you measure the longest finger, your middle finger, against the length of your palm, you kind of need to actually quite literally measure the length of your finger and the length of your palm. Now, if your middle finger is shorter than 7/8 of the palm's length, then you have short fingers. And this means that you are much more compatible with someone like Taehyung. And that essentially, the shorter the fingers, the more responsive. And the reason why this is a compatibility trait is because Taehyung having such long fingers means that he's absorbing a lot of information and he's breaking down a lot of information. He's thinking all the time. His thought process is very long. He's dreaming. It's very, very thoughtful. And so this, in some ways, this is a really beautiful element about a person because it makes them philosophical. It makes them deep thinkers. It makes them very meaningful in thought and mind and just very analytical, I suppose, data driven more, and it slows down action because of the amount of information that's been taken in. So it means whilst he has a greater capacity to absorb that information, he's slower to act on it. So there's always a pro and a con, usually. And the reason why he would become more compatible with someone with shorter fingers is because they will complement that element about him in his life. They will enhance his life by being able to pick up the slack where he can't and just be a bit more proactive in the moment. And that might be something that he is missing in his life. Just being able to kind of live in the moment and enjoy in the moment rather than let moments pass you by because you're so busy just thinking and wondering and daydreaming, because that's what he does, which, as I say, is a wonderful thing to have. But he needs to be brought back down to earth, and that's why earth hands are so good at that, because they are all about the practical and the material and the environmental. And to some degrees, they are complemented by the watery elements because they are fascinated by all things water and feminine, the imagination, dreams, even this kind of psychic element. They find these things really enriching and really enhances and enriches their souls because they don't have access to those things. They aren't as fluid and flexible. And these kind of aspects about Taehyung's personality really complements and um and benefits, in fact, Earth Hands as well. Now, it's important that there's not too much earth because there is something of a danger of flooding earth. If there's too much earth and too much water, then there can be emotional stifling, shall we say. So, whilst I've mentioned a square palm and short fingers, it doesn't matter if it's somewhat slightly rectangular. If it's slightly rectangular, it might actually be better. Now, Taehyung's fingertips, when you notice the first phalanges of all of his fingers, they're quite sort of pronounced. They're quite well developed. They're almost sort of, bulging here particularly, and this is very superstitious nature, and I think he's probably, really into all things supernatural. I think he has a really good sense of this, and he's probably, um, really clued up on all things, mystical and cosmic. And I think likewise, it's really important that he has, shared similar interests. So if you also have very well developed fingertips like this, um, kind of when I say well developed, I mean look at it. It's just sort of bulging outwards like this, and it creates someone who is just sort of absorbing all of life's mysteries. And that I think is really crucial. Do you find yourself highly spiritual, religious, always in search of those bigger questions, those deeper meanings? This is someone who needs to have those really deep and meaningful conversations. And small talk is not really, it's not as though he's not, he's capable, but this, he finds the really deep and meaningful conversations attractive. Do you find yourself pondering and talking about life's greatest mysteries at length? If so, this is a shared trait that I think you would have in common. Now, I mentioned a straight headline. I think Taehyung would benefit from someone in his personal life who is much more able than he is to pragmatically, um, rationally, and logically look at life, but also problem solve as well. Because Taehyung is great at um, a great many things, but planning and and being rational, being logical, and as I've already said, being grounded, being present, and just being very rational. These aren't strengths of his. So again, if he's involved in someone on a very personal level who are those things, this will really sort of complement his life. In a partnership, they will have the best of both worlds because whilst he's able to access the abstract and deep imagination, highly creative thinking, his partner will be able to, um, and quite efficiently and enjoy, in fact, the more um, environmental and grounded material kind of the practical, the physical day-to-day stuff. And in this way, both Taehyung and his ideal partner would be able to allow each other to see things from completely different perspectives. And this is really enhancing because both are enriching each other's lives. Now, I've mentioned, are you someone with a good deal of energy? And I mean that in quite a sort of physical sense. Do you have a good, robust um, vitality and immune system? Are you someone who's always on the go and is quite social as well? I think um, Young would really benefit from someone who is a lot more social than he is because there's a hesitancy, a lot like sugar, actually in, stepping outside, and I think increasing his social network and broadening his domestic sphere would really enrich and enhance his life. So if he met someone that was very social, had a lot of friends, and didn't have those kind of same experiences of um, being so burdened by that public eye image, and felt free, that would also in turn enable Taehyung to feel a bit more free. and again, see things from that different perspective and start living a little bit through someone else's eyes, someone else's perspective. And that I think would be really beneficial and actually um, increase this amount of it and increase the domestic sphere and all that is familiar and his relationships and really broaden his horizons. Do you want to travel? Do you want to explore the world? Are you someone who's bold with a lot of energy, with a lot of friends, and just not really afraid to say, well, let's just pack, let's go then, let's do it tomorrow? At the same time, you need to be very kind of practical and grounded in that. And these are actually, it sort of sounds like a contradiction. So you need to be very kind of present, very realistic and rational and logical and practical, but at the same time, be actually quite spontaneous and really willing to get out there and see the world and travel. The reason why I say this is if you have that kind of that desire, that burning desire to get out there and see as much as possible. The reason why I say that is because Taehyung is something of an analytical hand, and all analytical hands desire escape in some way, and they travel. And they either do it when they're young or they do it when they're older. Now, Taehyung will do it when he's older because he's not had the chance in the right kind of way, in that kind of sense of freedom to travel and explore. And a lot of Taehyung's exploration is within. But in the way that we explore what's within, we kind of need that frame of reference for what's out there first of all. And so it's almost like we reason with ourselves. Um, we work out what's within by figuring out what else there is out there. And to explore um, all the fascinating meanings of the world and the universe, and in turn really have a greater self-understanding and self-exploration. This is why a lot of people go to the jungle and take ayahuasca. It is of course to explore what's out there, but ultimately it's nothing unless we are learning within. And Taehyung would absolutely benefit from someone who is willing to take that plunge and travel, because he's actually quite shy, and there's a little bit of hesitancy here, and the possibility to miss out on opportunities because he's so cautious, because he's so hesitant. It's not to say that he's lacking in confidence because he is, but he's very cautious. So and I feel that at times there will be the possibility for him to kind of miss out on things. So it's really important that he's with someone who is very able to uh, pick up on what a good thing is on those opportunities and show him the way in a way that's very confident, that's very bold, and I think as well, just really kind of very rationally explaining things because although he's extremely intuitive and almost sort of psychic, there is a very analytical sense to him. So it's not as though um, those with a long and especially straight headline, unlike Taehyung's, because Taehyung's, if you notice, it's not straight and it dips right down into a wonderful bank of imagination. So someone who has a straight headline really see things in quite a black and white way, and they will be able to break down and explain and essentially reason. And again, this is that kind of yin and yang aspect. You've got Taehyung who's very abstract, very imaginative, creative, and his ideal partner is going to be someone who's very rational and practical and logical. So whilst his ideal partner's got to be someone who's actually um, yes, they need to be bold and just sort of able to sort of say, well, let's do this thing because it's going to be a great experience for us both. They also need to be able to plan ahead. So there's a feeling here of someone who needs to be very present and in the moment to help him, stay grounded and pull him back down to earth because he's constantly daydreaming. But at the same time, they need to be able to plan ahead because he's not as strong in terms of those administrative kind of practical, again, um, skills. Those organizational skills aren't quite there. So there's actually quite a rare blend of qualities here that is required in his ideal partner. And I think he would find a very attractive quality for him, I feel, would be someone who is very idealistic as well. Someone with a very long heart line, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Now, his heart line's long, but it rises up, arcs very delicately, very beautifully, like his emotional framework, in between Saturn and Jupiter. And this is someone with a strong sense of right and wrong, a healthy understanding of, good conscience, a good sense of morals. And absolutely, he needs someone with. If you've got a heartline that stops underneath Saturn, I'm sorry, but that's not. This isn't someone that he really is going to get on with. He needs someone that has a heartline a lot like this, or in fact, reaches right over onto Jupiter itself. Someone who's highly idealistic. I think he would find really appealing because these giving qualities. I think he's going to really understand and get behind that. Now, don't worry if your heartline is a little bit on the straight side as well, because that's not necessarily a bad thing for Taehyung. Because again, where it's not necessarily his love language, but I feel like he would understand and get on board with this on a very emotional level. That said, it can't be too straight. There has to be something of a curve to it, and it has to be long. I'm not really making a great deal of sense here, am I? Now, this might seem like an odd one, but I feel like it's important as well. The tip of your ring finger, aka Apollo, I feel like this needs to be very well developed, like we saw in Sugar's palm reading on Sunday, my last Sunday code study before this reading it anyway. And I feel like this kind of appreciation for the arts and all things beautiful and a sense of wonder and natural beauty, an appreciation for an aptitude towards really understanding the beautiful things in life. I feel like this is a really important quality. Um, and I think this is something that Taehyung is a really important kind of compatibility factor. Um, and I think that's important. If you have that kind of very well developed tip of Apollo. And if you want to know what I mean, have a look at Sugar's palm reading, and you'll see what I mean immediately. Now, going back to the whole energy thing, the reason why I mentioned it is because if you look at Hyung's thumbs, the thumb tip here, it tapers into something of a fine tip here. Now, he has a great ability to tackle something with a burst of energy. So for short periods of time, he's furiously working at something, and then he kind of needs a bit of a cat nap. Now, someone who will hugely complement his life is someone who has a greater ability, a greater stamina, physical stamina to power on through when he is not able to. And that is why I mentioned, do you have a good amount of vitality and energy, literal physical energy? And this is where I think that trait, that quality will really complement him in his life. Are you organized? Are you good with money? Do you have a good sense of routine? Are you neat and tidy? Are you a good planner? Organizational skills are key here. These are all things that are in some way missing in Tai Hyung's life, and he would really benefit um, having in his ideal partner. So, have a think about some of the things I've mentioned there. The straight headline is key, and actually having a lifeline that is larger, that kind of swings out larger than this, a wider arc, should I say, because that's going to show that you are um, having an increased social network. You're a bit more kind of willing to step outside of your known world. Um, And as well as that, Taehyung has this kind of headline that is attached to his lifeline for quite some time, and and this is part of that hesitance, part of that cautiousness, which is a good thing to have. It's also why he's quite shy. And if you look on his right hand in particular, the headline is attached to the lifeline for a very long period of time. This is a great deal. This hesitancy, this shyness, this overcautiousness has developed over time. So we need someone to bring him out of his shell. And this is why I mentioned, if you are someone who has a big social network, a lot of friends, you're very social, um, this is something that's really going to bring him out of his shell and really complement him. And he's going to really benefit from having someone like this in his life. If this is you, if you have a headline that breaks away from the lifeline much sooner, or in fact, if there is a disconnect altogether from the lifeline, as I've mentioned in my previous video with JK, I believe it was his compatibility trait, then this is also a really good sign because it shows that you are independent, shows that you are bold, and I think if there's too much of a gap, though, between the lifeline and the headline, if you do have one, that's not good as well because if there's too much of one, then that's probably going to put him off a bit. It's probably going to scare him off a little bit. So there does need to be some semblance of coherence in the way in which he lives his life, but he does need to be brought out of his shell, and that will happen later on in life. He's going to travel. If you're thinking about traveling, if you've got that travel bug, this is something that he's going to find really attractive. If you are spiritual, if you have well-developed tips of your fingers, in particular Apollo, I think this is really important. And the part of the reason why I say this is because this is really going to inspire him and his watery elements. And this is all kind of tied in, really. It's going to bring him out of his shell, get him to see that wide open world, and your love and your appreciation for natural beauty. That is going to bring him out. That's going to inspire him, and he's going to find that very appealing. Now, if your heart line is, and it can't be too straight. I don't want a completely straight heart line because that's a reservedness that isn't going to get on too well with him. It's going to be too emotionally conservative for him to for his love language to be heard. So your heart line needs to be actually quite low lying like this. If you look on the right hand, it's very low lying. And it needs to have a gentle arc and it needs to come in at least underneath both these middle fingers here, or reach over onto Jupiter itself. It needs to have this kind of gentle arc and it needs to be long. That makes you highly idealistic. That makes you someone who is philanthropic a little bit, and it makes your love language someone who's your strongest love language anyway is you're there to turn up with your presence, your effort, your time, your effort, your energy. And I've already mentioned that, haven't I? If you're there to show up and be who you are in a very sort of genuine way, that's going to provide a sense of security and really complement other aspects of his life that he is not so grounded in. Let me know what your thoughts are on this compatibility palm reading, this hand analysis to truly find out who Taehyung's ideal partner is. I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you feel you are that person? And let me know if you've seen anything in this hand or if you have any questions at all. Please keep them coming in. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Please consider becoming a member on my channel. And thank you all so much for watching. I will see you on the next video. Please do consider watching any of my other videos. I have a whole BTS palm reading, tarot reading playlist now. And if you've got any suggestions for me for any other videos, please keep them coming in. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'm Pisces Palmist, and I'll see you on the next one.